Number 13. A double dose of revenge porn. Most revenge porn crimes are committed electronically, but one Louisiana woman allegedly decided to go the old-fashioned route in 2020 by mailing intimate photos of two individuals to over 24 people. According to the Calcasieu Parish Sheriff's Office, 32-year-old Sarah D. Faris of Sulphur had access to one of the victim's personal information. She was accused of sending degrading letters about the man to at least 30 people, along with copies of his nude photos, and traveling to Texas to mail the letters. Sheriff's Deputy Stitch Gullery told local station Fox 29 that the victim was contacted by multiple people about the letters. The man realized that Faris had access to his social media account because she had helped him set it up years earlier. After learning about Faris's alleged revenge plot, authorities charged her with 150 counts of non-consensual disclosure of a private image. She was released on a $75,000 bond later that day, but soon ended up back in custody on even more charges. Just weeks after her first arrest, Faris was accused of including photos of not one, but two victims in the perverted pamphlets that she sent in the mail. She was charged with another 30 counts of non-consensual disclosure of a private image. Faris was freed on a $15,000 bond and scheduled to return to court at a later date. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 12. Hilda Nordhoke. 27-year-old Robert Miller arrived at his Wichita, Kansas home one day in 2018 to find a screen door ripped off its hinges, a smashed mailbox, and a window that had been shattered by a brick. Inside, he found his beloved dog beaten to death. Police initially failed to identify a suspect, but continued to investigate the case. In the meantime, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, better known as PETA, offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to the identification and arrest of the person responsible. Miller was devastated by the loss of his 10-year-old American bulldog, who he called Buffalo Boy. Nearly a year later, in early 2019, police charged 30-year-old Hilda Nordhoke in connection with the crime after identifying her through surveillance footage and a license plate reader program. Prosecutors claimed that the woman had a romantic past with Miller and accused her of killing his dog in a jealous rage. In 2021, Nordhoke pleaded no contest to animal cruelty, theft, and burglary, and was sentenced to 30 days in jail plus 2 years of probation. While handing down the sentence, the judge issued a stern warning that if she violated the terms of her probation, she would automatically be required to serve 13 months in prison for burglary, plus 12 months in county lockup for animal cruelty. Number 11. Candace Nicole Jones and Edward Brannon Barry. 10 days after 34-year-old mother of two Emily Hacker vanished in early 2017, her body was found in a shallow grave in rural Burleson County, Texas. The contents of the burial were burned in an apparent attempt to destroy evidence, but the medical examiner was able to conclude that the young woman died from blunt force injuries. Investigators quickly discovered that Hacker had been recently pulled over by the police for a routine traffic stop. While searching her vehicle, officers found a gun. Hacker told the cops that the weapon wasn't hers and that it belonged to 32-year-old Candace Nicole Jones of Rockdale. Detectives theorized that Jones murdered Hacker for ratting her out to the police. She and 4 other suspects, including 32-year-old Edward Brannon Barry, were arrested in connection with Hacker's death. Jones and Barry were each charged with 1 count of capital murder. Jones and Brannon both pleaded guilty and were sentenced to 50 years in prison. As part of their plea agreements, they waived their right to appeal their cases. According to records, they will both become eligible for parole in 2042, and their latest release date is in 2067. Number 10. Yasmin Walker. A very unfortunate British man was enjoying a movie at the cinema one day in 2021 when he began receiving text messages informing him that his nude photo had been posted on social media. His ex-girlfriend, 30-year-old Yasmin Walker, had shared the intimate snapshot with her 1,300 followers, along with a sarcastic comment asking, "What the bleep is that?" followed by a laughing emoji. The victim begged Walker to delete the post. She finally complied when the man threatened to call the police, but by then, the damage was done. Authorities charged Walker with disclosing a private photo with the intent to cause distress. Walker claimed that she posted the photo by accident and blamed her poor vision for clicking the wrong button. During her trial, her attorney argued that his client suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder stemming from multiple abusive relationships, although none of those relationships were with the victim in the revenge porn case. In fact, Walker claimed that her vision was bad because of injuries that an ex-boyfriend caused during an attack. The defendant's lawyer also told the court that Walker suffered from a nearly decade-long marijuana habit and that she was trying to kick the habit for good. While the judge took these factors into consideration, he also thought that it was important to sentence Walker appropriately for her actions and to set an example by imposing a punishment that showed that this type of crime will not be tolerated. Walker received a 3-month reduced prison sentence in what the judge described as a short, sharp shock, so that people know revenge pornography means prison. Number 9. Kenisha Rice and Sheldon Johnson. 39-year-old Kenyana Edwards made the fateful decision to drive drunk after leaving a nightclub in early 2023. She drove the wrong way along a Las Vegas highway and collided with another car at 2:30 in the morning. Edwards and the other driver both died at the scene. A toxicology test later revealed that Edwards' blood alcohol level was more than 3 times the legal limit when she got behind the wheel, and she also had cocaine and marijuana in her system. Tragedy struck again the very next day when Edwards' boyfriend, 35-year-old Martin Loftus, was found dead in his apartment with multiple gunshot wounds. Evidence at the scene suggested that the shooter had followed Loftus down a hallway as he tried to run into a bedroom to hide. Based on witnesses' description of a vehicle that was seen leaving the apartment complex, along with other pieces of evidence, investigators identified the suspected killers as Kenyana Edwards' brother, 34-year-old Sheldon Johnson, and his girlfriend, 36-year-old Kenisha Rice. According to police, Johnson had made posts on social media implying that he blamed Loftus for his sister's death. He also allegedly alluded to his plans to murder Loftus as revenge for Edwards' death. Johnson and Rice were arrested in California and extradited to Las Vegas, where they each face charges of open murder, conspiracy to commit murder, burglary, and conspiracy to commit burglary. Number 8. David Crawford. Investigators in 6 counties across Maryland spent 2 decades trying to solve a string of nearly a dozen arsons that started during the early 2000s and resulted in multiple families losing their homes and/or vehicles. Several of the fires were set when the victims were asleep in the middle of the night. Miraculously, all of the families who were targeted in the years-long crime spree managed to escape the flames without physical injury. Law enforcement wasn't even sure if all the crimes were connected until 2020, when they discovered evidence in the aftermath of yet another arson that finally led them to a suspect. The victims had a history of disagreements with former Laurel Police Chief David Crawford, who had retired back in 2010. A closer look into previous cases revealed even more connections between Crawford and past victims, who all had a history of issues with the former top cop. The targets included former colleagues, a chiropractor, and even Crawford's stepson. Evidence at the crime scenes showed a repeated pattern of the culprit using gasoline as an accelerant, and at least one of the crimes was captured on home surveillance footage. During a search of Crawford's home in 2021, investigators found evidence further connecting him to the crimes, including a list of targets. And while they were able to connect Crawford to the crime using forensic evidence, his grudges against the victims proved to be the big break in the case that led to the rest of the discoveries pointing toward his possible guilt. The accused serial arsonist was finally arrested in March of 2021. He was charged with 58 counts in 4 different counties, including Prince George's County, Montgomery County, Frederick County, and Howard County. Following a months-long trial in early 2023, a Howard County judge convicted Crawford of 8 counts of attempted first-degree murder, 3 counts of arson, and 1 count of malicious burning in connection with 3 separate arsons. He received 8 life sentences, 6 of which are to be served concurrently, plus 75 years behind bars. As long as the conviction and sentence stand, the 71-year-old will never be released from prison. Crawford has maintained his innocence throughout the case and continues to do so as he awaits trial in various other counties. He plans to appeal his conviction despite facing at least 4 more attempted murder charges and at least 3 counts of first-degree arson. Number 7. Michael Keatley. A group of 6 men were playing cards and drinking beer outside a home in Ruskin, Florida on Thanksgiving Day in 2010 when a minivan pulled up to the property. Armed with a shotgun and wearing a shirt that said Sheriff on it, the driver exited the vehicle and told the men he was looking for someone who went by the nickname Creeper. The group knew Creeper, but he wasn't at the gathering. Suddenly, the armed visitor ordered everyone to the ground. Believing that he was a real cop, the friends followed the man's orders. But he wasn't a police officer, and he proceeded to shoot the men one by one, killing 28-year-old Juan Gutron and his 22-year-old brother Sergio Gutron. The other 4 victims survived their injuries. Police were initially at a loss to identify the suspect, who fled the scene before law enforcement arrived. A few days after the shooting, an informant told investigators that a local ice cream man, Michael Keatley, had recently been talking about his plans to get revenge on a pair of thieves who had robbed and opened fire on him 11 months earlier. The masked gunman shot Keatley 5 times, leaving him permanently disabled, and made off with $12 that they stole from his truck. Keatley had mistakenly suspected Creeper of being one of the thieves, when in reality none of his 6 victims had anything to do with the robbery. As it turned out, they were targeted in a disturbing case of mistaken identity. Authorities arrested Keatley several days after the crime, and he spent the next decade languishing in jail until the case went to trial in 2020. His defense attorneys argued that he was medically incapable of committing the crime due to his injuries from being shot months earlier. They also accused the police of carrying out a faulty investigation, which they described as nothing short of a nightmare. The first trial ended in a mistrial, and the case dragged on for 3 more years. In 2023, more than 12 years after the shooting, a second jury found Keatley guilty of 2 counts of murder and 4 counts of attempted murder. He was sentenced to 6 concurrent life terms without the chance of parole, and he reportedly plans to appeal his case. Number 6. Seoul subway slaying. While working for the Seoul metro system in South Korea's capital in 2019, John Ju-hwan expressed an interest in a 28-year-old female co-worker. The woman rejected his advances, but he refused to take no for an answer. Instead of respectfully backing off, Jeon persisted in his attempts to woo his colleague, calling her more than 300 times and begging her to date him. When she continued to turn him down, the crazed admirer threatened to hurt himself. Over time, John's behavior escalated from annoying to terrifying as his stalking campaign became increasingly aggressive. He even installed a hidden camera in a workplace bathroom and threatened to blackmail his co-worker with the videos he captured. After dealing with the unwanted advances for 2 years, the victim reported John to the police in 2021. She filed a second complaint a few months later. Authorities charged John with stalking, illegal filming, and threatening, and he was fired from his job. Prosecutors attempted to detain John pending the outcome of his case, but they failed to obtain the court's approval to hold him in custody due to his low risk of fleeing. No order of protection was issued for the victim, who was essentially left to deal with the situation on her own as Jeon continued to terrorize her. After being convicted in connection with the woman's first complaint and sentenced to 9 years in prison, Jeon appealed his case. He remained free even as he continued to harass and intimidate the victim, including with demands to settle his criminal case in a way that was favorable to him. On the day before Jeon was scheduled to be resentenced, he hid inside the employee bathroom wearing a swim cap and rubber gloves and waited for his co-worker to enter. He brutally stabbed the woman to death at the end of her shift, sparking widespread public outrage over the missed opportunities to prevent the tragedy from happening in the first place. Jeon admitted that he killed his victim as an act of revenge for getting him in trouble with the law. When the woman refused to settle his criminal case, he became intent on murdering her. The obsessed killer was convicted of murder. Prosecutors pushed for the death penalty, but the court sentenced John to 40 years in prison, followed by 15 years on an ankle monitor. The woman's murder happened right around the same time South Korea implemented a new anti-stalking law, and yet the policy failed to protect her. In response to nationwide protests, the country's president, Yoon Suk-yeol, ordered the Justice Ministry to improve the legislation. Lawmakers removed a clause that previously banned authorities from prosecuting suspects without a victim's consent, which arguably put victims at risk of retaliation from the accused. Stalking suspects are also now required to wear an ankle monitor even before sentencing. These long overdue changes came amid a years-long battle to improve legal protections for victims of gender-based violence in South Korea. And while many activists continue to campaign for additional improvements, the heightened policies mark a major step in the right direction toward keeping victims safe and holding perpetrators accountable. Number 5. Jake Balotta. When 22-year-old Jake Balotta's PlayStation disappeared in 2018, he suspected his former roommate, 24-year-old Joshua Barnes, of stealing the console. Barnes had recently been evicted from their apartment in Maitland, Florida for not paying his rent, and Balotta believed that his ex-roomie had broken back into the unit and stolen the video game system, along with a bong and a marijuana scale. A third roommate, Ian McClurg, would later tell investigators that Balotta was beyond pissed about the alleged theft and that he had punched a hole in the wall during a fit of rage. Balotta's anger only grew when he heard that Barnes was supposedly bragging to people about stealing the PlayStation. In addition to being outraged, Balotta was worried that the talk would inspire others to burglarize his apartment. Intent on getting his PlayStation back, Balotta devised a plan to lure Barnes to the residence. He invited his former roommate to a made-up event, promising that there would be women there. When Barnes arrived at the apartment, Balotta stabbed him to death in a frenzied knife attack while McClurg watched. Balotta and McClurg planned to wrap Barnes's body in garbage bags and remove it from the apartment. But their new roommate unexpectedly arrived home and dialed 911 after discovering the carnage inside. During the call, the roommate told the emergency dispatcher that there was a history of problems between the suspects and the victim, but that he didn't know exactly what had happened because he had just walked in the door. When the dispatcher asked the young man how he knew Barnes was dead, he said that the victim was laying on top of a plastic bag and not moving. He also said that he was afraid that the suspects would do something to harm him and his girlfriend, since they were aware of the crime. Thankfully, officers apprehended Balotta and McClurg before anyone else could get hurt. Balotta claimed that he killed Barnes in self-defense, but his story didn't hold up in court. He was convicted of murder and was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. McClurg pleaded guilty to accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence and received a 10-year prison sentence. Number 4. Gruesome Gangland Execution. Residents in New York City's East Harlem neighborhood were sent running for cover one evening in April of 2023 when a young man was shot in the head at the intersection of East 123rd Street and Lexington Avenue. A local hairdresser named Sochna later told the New York Daily News that she heard around 4 shots. The moment the gunfire broke out, she and other terrified civilians took shelter in the back of her hair salon, where they prayed that no stray bullets would pierce the storefront's glass entrance and strike them in their path. Paramedics rushed the victim, 26-year-old Hector Delgado, to the hospital, but it was too late to save him. Members of the community were left shaken and exasperated by the violence, which some said happens too often. Police arrested the accused shooter, 23-year-old Trevor Gibbs, 3 weeks later. According to prosecutors, Gibbs murdered Delgado as revenge for the point-blank execution 3 days earlier of 19-year-old Jalen Duncan. The slayings came amid an ongoing feud between gangs, and investigators believe that Delgado's murder was also linked to the drug trade. Gibbs faces 1 murder count along with a weapons charge. 5 more suspects were charged in connection with the crime, including 24-year-old Andre Clark, who faces a murder charge. 20-year-old James Figueroa, 21-year-old Ethaniel Coleman, and 25-year-old Ibrahim Ndaya were each charged with 1 count of attempted murder. All 5 of the men and a 6th suspect, 21-year-old Kevin Major, were hit with conspiracy charges. They're being held without bail at Rikers Island while they await the next steps in their cases. Number 3. Robert Manor and Victor Gray. In January 2018, 55-year-old Raymond Wright vanished without a trace from his workplace in Rockland, California. He was never seen again. 2 days after Wright's disappearance, his brother encountered a strange man inside Wright's home. The man fled the scene, leaving behind a drinking cup. About a week after that, Wright's abandoned truck was found, but the missing man himself was nowhere to be found. 5 days later, a man named Victor Gray led police on a chase while intoxicated behind the wheel. When law enforcement caught up with him, they found evidence in his vehicle that they later connected to Wright's case, including a bloody raincoat, Wright's wallet, and several other belongings of his. Meanwhile, a DNA hit from the drinking cup that was left behind at Wright's house turned up as a match to Gray. Investigators also discovered a letter from Gray to a man named Robert Manor, complaining about not receiving a payment for what sounded like a hired hit on Wright. 7 years earlier, Wright had crashed his vehicle drunk, causing serious injuries to Robert Manor and his wife. Wright served prison time for the accident, but his mysterious disappearance and the evidence connecting Manor to the case led detectives to believe that Manor never let go of his grudge against Wright for the crash. In a rare case of authorities pursuing a murder case without a body, prosecutors accused Manor of hiring Gray to murder Wright as revenge for the previous DUI crash. A jury convicted both men of first-degree murder, and they were each sentenced to life in prison without parole. Wright's body remains missing to this day. It's understandable that Manor was upset with Wright for the life-changing consequences of his decision to get behind the wheel drunk, but 2 wrongs don't make a right, and Manor's refusal to move on from the incident in a healthy and legal way only hurt him more in the end by taking away his freedom. Number 2. Marquis Goodwin. During the pre-dawn hours one morning in July of 2023, 18-year-old Lovell Brown left his home in Sanford, Florida on foot with his mother and several other family members to go buy some snacks. Along their walk to a nearby Circle K convenience store, the family crossed paths with a group of 3 to 4 people who were heading in the opposite direction. According to Brown's mother, Paulette Ramsey, a man from the group approached her son and an altercation broke out between the young men. The fight quickly escalated to blows and then gunshots. In what can only be described as a mother's worst nightmare, Ramsey stood by helplessly as her son collapsed to the ground. A bystander performed CPR in a desperate attempt to revive the young man, but he died from his injuries. Authorities charged the alleged shooter, 18-year-old Marquis Goodwin, with Lovell's murder. Ramsey recognized the suspect as someone her son had gone to high school with. She told investigators that in the months leading up to Lovell's death, she had received phone calls from several of her incarcerated friends, warning her to move her son out of the area for his own safety. The concerned mother initially heeded the warnings and sent Lovell to stay with his sister in California. He moved back to Florida a few months later and tried to keep a low profile, but the threats continued. On the day before Lovell's murder, someone allegedly threw a heavy rock at Ramsey's residence. Just hours before the shooting, Lovell had received a text message from someone who disliked him, challenging him to go outside. He ignored the harassment and stayed at home until the snack run later that night. According to court documents, Goodwin's cousin told police that she tried to persuade him not to go out that evening, because she suspected that he was in a gang and that something bad might happen. Others reported that Goodwin and Brown were entangled in a long-running feud and that Lovell had beaten up his killer in the past. Goodwin had recently served jail time in an unrelated case, and the rivalry continued even after the 2 men were given some much-needed space from one another. Authorities believe that Goodwin killed Lovell in an act of revenge over their previous run-ins. The suspect is being held without bail as he awaits trial. Number 1. Josue Vasquez. 18-year-old Alyssa Banks was a member of the National Honor Society and the senior class president at her high school in Largo, Maryland. She was looking forward to the next chapter in her life after graduating in 2016. While out on a date with her boyfriend, Deshaun Moore, during the early morning hours a few months later, Alyssa got out of the car to help her beau parallel park. It was just before 2 o'clock in the morning when a group of men approached the couple. A man later identified by law enforcement as 20-year-old Josue Vasquez allegedly opened the door of the car that Alyssa's boyfriend was driving and asked him where he was from. According to authorities, as soon as Moore mentioned that he was from Largo, one of the men opened fire on the couple. Moore survived, but Alyssa died from a gunshot wound to the head. The case went unsolved for 2 years. Finally, in 2018, Vasquez and 2 alleged accomplices, Thomas Jenkins and Daniel Butler, were charged with Alyssa's murder. Prosecutors accused Vasquez of shooting Alyssa to avenge the death of a friend who had been killed at a house party a year earlier, even though neither Alyssa nor her boyfriend were at the house party or involved in the previous killing. Moore reportedly identified Vasquez as the gunman, and a friend of the defendant also claimed that they had overheard him confessing to the crime. Vasquez's co-defendant, Thomas Jenkins, testified in court that on the night of the shooting, he and Vasquez were looking around for anyone who matched the description of someone who had been at the house party a year earlier. Jenkins admitted that he didn't recognize the victims and claimed that the gun he was carrying malfunctioned and didn't fire. Jenkins took a plea deal while the case against Vasquez went to trial. Vasquez's lawyers argued that 2 of the key witnesses in the case were unreliable. They also claimed that the witnesses' testimony was bought and paid for in exchange for leniency in their own criminal cases. Moreover, there were some alarming discrepancies between Moore's description of the shooter as a black man who was at least 6 feet tall, and Vasquez, a Hispanic man who stands at just 5 feet 7 inches tall. After considering the evidence, the jury acquitted Vasquez, marking an emotional victory for the defense and a heartbreaking disappointment for the victims' families.
Number 8. Witness shot to death. 21-year-old Kelsey Schelling was pregnant when she went missing in 2012. Her ex-boyfriend and the child's father, Dante Lucas, had asked her to drive from Denver to his hometown of Pueblo in Colorado. He told her that he had a big surprise planned for her. Schelling didn't turn up for work the next day, and after a worried co-worker called her mother, an 8-year-long ordeal began for their family. When Lucas was contacted, he told her mother that Schelling had called him from a private number and that she would be contacting them soon. Lucas was questioned by the police, but his story didn't match up to the CCTV footage found in the Walmart parking lot where he said he met his girlfriend. For the first couple of years into the investigation, Schelling was thought to be missing. Her mother still hoped for her return after years and even set up a Facebook page to help spread the word. In 2017, when the authorities had enough evidence against Lucas, they charged him with first-degree murder. In 2021, his trial began, but the case faced a major setback. 31-year-old Roxanne Martinez was all set to testify against Lucas. Martinez's testimony was especially important for the case because, according to the district attorney, Lucas had confessed to her about the murder. But on February 25th, Roxanne was found dead from a gunshot wound. The Denver Police Department said that her death wasn't related to the case, but Martinez's cousin believes otherwise. According to the cousin, there was a big possibility that Martinez was murdered because of the ongoing case. It can't just be a coincidence, right? Despite Martinez's murder, Schelling's family got their justice. 29-year-old Dante Lucas was found guilty of murder by the jury in February 2021 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Number 7. Witness faked a story. Witnesses are a crucial part of any trial, especially eyewitnesses. There's nothing better than getting a witness who saw the crime take place. But sometimes things can get out of hand, especially when the witness turns out to be the villain. In 1994, George Radcliffe was found dead in his pickup truck in North Carolina. A year later, Montoyer Dante Sharp was charged with the murder. Years later, in 2019, Sharp was pardoned by a judge after authorities found that a witness had completely made up the story leading to Sharp's sentence. When the trial for Radcliffe's murder was going on, the prosecutors called 15-year-old Charlene Johnson as a witness. Johnson testified that she saw Sharp and Radcliffe in an argument. According to her statement, the two were fighting over a drug deal. Johnson claimed that she saw Sharp with another man, trying to hoard Radcliffe into a truck. The two then crashed the vehicle in a vacant lot and threw away the key. Johnson said the altercation was face-to-face, and that's when Radcliffe was shot. However, that doesn't hold true since the medical examiner's notes say that the bullet was fired from far away. The examiner hadn't heard Johnson's testimony during the trial and couldn't highlight the mismatch. A few weeks after the ruling, Johnson took back her testimony, but that didn't mean Sharp could change his sentence. It took him 24 long years to finally get freedom from the wrongful conviction. Johnson's statements weren't just exaggerated, they were completely false. She wasn't present at the time of the murder, but could give her story in such detail because she just made it up based on television shows. This grave mistake took 2 decades of Sharp's life. Number 6. Parrot witness. Some criminals leave evidence, some criminals leave witnesses. But what about the ones that leave none? How do you find the culprit, and more importantly, how do you solve the case? Real life is not like those movies where a detective conveniently finds important clues that lead to the crime. Well, sometimes it is though. In this case, a crucial witness was left behind who had seen the gruesome crime, but the court couldn't use their testimony. In 2015, Martin Durham from Michigan was shot dead, and his wife Glenna was injured from a gunshot. Other than the two, nobody else saw what actually went down, but their pet, an African gray parrot named Bud, saw more than he should have. Martin's ex-wife Christina took the pet and realized that the parrot was repeating the conversation Glenna and he had had on the night of the murder. The parrot repeated the argument they were having, and it ended with the words, "Don't shoot." Martin's mother also believes that Bud might have picked up on the heated argument. That bird picks up everything and anything, and it's got the filthiest mouth around. She told the BBC News. Using Bud's statement would have made the case against Glenna stronger. A prosecutor in the trial even considered using Bud's squawking as evidence, but the plan was dismissed. Bud was never called to testify during the trial, and his recording wasn't used either. Fortunately, the other evidence in the case was enough to prove that Glenna had shot her husband 5 times before trying to kill herself. She was charged with first-degree murder in 2017 and was sentenced to life behind bars. Number 5. Witness in murder trial found dead. In 2011, Michaela Mikarivi was on her honeymoon in Mauritius. She was the daughter of a well-known football manager, Mickey Hart. Sadly, she was found strangled to death in her hotel room. Her death caught widespread media attention. It was also the first murder of a tourist in Mauritius. But the trial got even more twisted when a key witness of the case was also found murdered. On the 10th of January, Michaela and her husband John finished lunch at their hotel. After the meal, Michaela decided to head back to the room to get some biscuits for their tea. According to the investigators, when she entered the room, she was pinned to the ground and strangled. Michaela was found in the bath with the water still running. When she didn't return to the table, John went to check on her and found her lifeless body. 3 male workers of the hotel were arrested, and the trial began in 2012. Avinash Trihubun and Sandip Monia were charged with murder, and Raj Trikoi was charged with conspiracy to murder. According to a DNA test by a forensic expert in England, no DNA traces of the subjects were found on Michaela's body. More controversies arose when Avinash alleged that the major crime investigation team had beaten a confession out of him. A 9-member jury found the men not guilty. In June 2021, the Mauritius government agreed to take another look at the murder. This time, one of the main accused, Raj Trikoi, had agreed to be a witness. He was reported missing by his wife, and a day later, on the 3rd of October, his dead body was found near a junkyard. His mysterious death was speculated to be a suicide, but the investigation is ongoing. What do you think happened? Was it suicide or another homicide? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give us a like and share the video. For more interesting stories, stay with us till the end. Number 4. Key witness killed. In September 2018, 26-year-old accountant Botham Sham John was in his apartment when off-duty Dallas cop Amber Geiger entered and shot him to death. Geiger lived in the same building but on the floor above Jean. In her defense, she said that she mistook Jean's house as hers and thought he was an intruder. She was initially charged with manslaughter, but the conviction was later changed to murder when her racial biases came to light. Geiger was found to have an intent to kill, especially because she didn't follow police protocol of not entering a building if there's a potential burglar. The correct order would be to call for backup. During the trial, Jean's across-the-hall neighbor Joshua Brown was a key witness. Brown was returning from a football game and was in the hall of the building when he heard two people talking. It was followed by gunshots. Brown ran to safety and later returned to his apartment. He stated in his testimony that he saw Geiger talk on her phone before the officers arrived. His testimony was one of the key factors that put Geiger behind bars for 10 years, and the reason justice was actually served. But only a few days after the trial, Brown was also shot dead. It sparked a huge outrage, and people started speculating that his murder was revenge for the testimony against Geiger. I just spoke with Joshua Brown's mother. She is devastated. We all are. Joshua Brown was a key witness in the murder of Botham Jean that helped put Amber Geiger away. We need answers. Jean's lawyer, Lee Merritt, said. The murder caught the attention of many politicians as well. In December 2019, 3 men were charged with Brown's murder. According to police reports, it was a drug deal gone bad. The murderers were an uncle and nephew pair who drove 300 miles to Dallas. The trio wanted to kill Brown, but met up with him on the pretext of buying drugs. They are truly heinous criminals. Number 3. Missing before trial. Christopher James Losell, a former stockbroker from Largo, put himself in dangerous waters when he decided to borrow money from loan sharks. Losell had borrowed $40,000 from the Basha brothers that owned a water scooter business in Florida. The man also had ties with the Lucchesi, a prominent crime family from New York. The deal was that Losell would return the money in 45 days at a 50% interest rate. Losell failed to return the money, and the lawless family sure wasn't pleased with that. The 30-year-old was later kidnapped from his home by 4 men in 2004. They threatened him and assaulted him in an attempt to get the money back. When they let him go, Losell went straight to the cops and filed a kidnapping case against the Bashas. However, things took a grim turn right before the trial. Losell was supposed to stand as a witness in the extortion and kidnapping case. But on the eve of the accused kidnapper's trial, Losell was nowhere to be found. Initially, it wasn't clear whether Losell had left on his own or if he was kidnapped again. A warrant was issued against Losell for failing to turn up on the day of the trial. But not long after, Tampa police found his car with its windows open and the key still in ignition. On March 15, 2005, Losell was found murdered in Manatee County. He had 5 gunshot wounds in his chest. Losell's death meant that he couldn't give his crucial testimony for the case. But the recorded statements he gave to the investigators about the kidnapping, along with taped calls between him and the Bashas, were still used as evidence. Based on that, the jury found 2 of the men innocent of kidnapping. The jury couldn't reach a verdict on the other 2 accused. All of the men denied any ties with Losell's murder and even passed polygraph tests. The investigators stated that there were no other leads in the investigation, and today the bloodthirsty criminals roam the streets free. Number 2. Made-up testimony. Doris Washington and her 13-year-old daughter Nishanda were found dead in their home back in 1991. The firefighters found their bodies on the bed of their burning home. A year later, Angela Oliver's statement became a key testimony that put suspect Daryl Howard behind bars. Howard had always maintained that he didn't murder the mother and daughter and that someone else was responsible. Now, almost 26 years later, Oliver has stated that she never actually witnessed any murder. She recanted her statement and said that she was forced to say it by the lead detective, Daryl Dowdy. During the trial in 1995, Oliver declined to answer questions and was treated as a hostile witness. Since she refused to help, a recording of her statement was played to the jury. In the recording, Oliver said Howard had threatened to kill Doris Washington if she didn't come up with his drugs or money. She described how Howard and his brother went back to Doris's house and beat her. Oliver revealed that Howard said he had to burn them since he didn't want to leave behind any evidence. In a federal civil trial that began this November, Howard stated that Dowdy's evidence tampering violated his right to a fair trial. He also stated that Dowdy fed Oliver the information that was used in her recorded testimony. Dowdy refused all the allegations against him. New evidence revealed traces of semen on Doris's body. The DNA matched that of Jermick Jones, who was 15 at the time and was associated with the New York Boys. This group was a violent gang that used young boys for their crimes since they were less likely to face harsher sentences. Dowdy had allegedly received a tip about the gang but ignored it. Howard was pardoned in April 2020 after serving more than 2 decades of jail time for a crime he did not commit. Talk about a failure of the system. Number 1. Testifying from the grave. As always, we save the best for the last. How can a dead person be a witness? It sounds impossible, right? Well, not in this case. It was not some spooky trial with a ghost. The reality was actually very practical. Nicolas Quintanilla from California had allegedly shot and killed his girlfriend. A day after the murder, he was arrested at his home and the trial began soon after. During the proceedings, the prosecutor called many witnesses to the stand who testified against Quintanilla. They spoke of the abusive relationship he had with his girlfriend. There were no eyewitnesses, and most of the statements revolved around past conversations. The victim had complained about his abusive behavior to many friends, and this was the main evidence the prosecutors used. The victim was the main witness of the crime, and she was dead. So the prosecutors had to resort to using conversations she had about Quintanilla. Was she speaking from the grave? Technically, no, but also, in a way, yes. Such testimonies are called hearsay. Usually hearsay is not accepted in courts because there is no way the testimony can be examined for accuracy. The witnesses who spoke about Quintanilla's abusive behavior gave hearsay evidence since they were providing statements from the deceased victim that could not be examined. But Quintanilla's case was different. The prosecutors came up with an idea to use forfeiture by wrongdoing, another rule in the court of law. Under this rule, the lawyers managed to convince jurors that he killed the girlfriend, so she couldn't testify against him in court. The dead victim's statements were recorded, and Quintanilla was found guilty of murder. But his lawyer appealed that the statements couldn't be taken into account. He argued that since there's not enough evidence to prove that Quintanilla killed her to keep her from testifying, the forfeiture by wrongdoing rule couldn't be used. The conviction against him was reversed.
Number 8. Lisa Schuler. In May 2013, a 49-year-old Louisville, Kentucky man named Charles Pierce was shot dead at his married mistress's home in southern Indiana. 32-year-old Lisa Schuler initially claimed that Pierce was an intruder, but she didn't exactly have a good explanation for why his pants were down. She was also unable to hide the hundreds of text messages they'd exchanged before detectives got their hands on the victim's phone. After realizing that her initial story wasn't going to pan out, Schuler said that she killed Pierce during a kinky game they were playing because she was afraid he'd reveal their affair to her estranged husband. She further explained that she was worried that Pierce had photos from their previous encounter, and she suspected that he planned to show them to her unsuspecting hubby. So she solved the problem by pulling a handgun from her belt in the middle of performing a certain act. She then mercilessly emptied the clip into her illicit lover. It was carried out with a sense of chilling deliberateness, as if Schuler waited until Pierce was so distracted that he had absolutely no chance to defend himself from what was about to happen. Schuler ultimately pleaded guilty to murder and was sentenced to 45 years in prison. According to records, however, she could see freedom as early as 2034, after serving just 20 years behind bars. Number 7. Ryan Ravito. A 34-year-old California man named Ryan Ravito landed in hot water with the law in early 2023 when he was arrested on suspicion of possessing more than 900 illicit photos and videos that he captured using a hidden bathroom camera. His own wife reported him to the police after discovering the camera and confronting him. According to authorities, Ravito promised to destroy the camera, but this wasn't good enough for his wife, who was so disgusted by his alleged crimes that she saw no other option than to alert law enforcement. The plot thickened when news sources revealed that a previous wife had reported Ravito for a similar crime back in 2018. Sadly, though, this previous case got lost in the computer system due to a software glitch, and Ravito went uncharged until the more recent allegations against him came to light. While filing the current case into the computer system, police discovered the earlier accusations in a file that had never made it to its proper destination after being rerouted by the software. But now that the second round of allegations have been brought forth and the first case has been rediscovered, Ravito is facing felony charges. He's maintained his innocence through his lawyer, who told NBC reporters that he prefers to fight the case through the legal system rather than the media. But otherwise, he's declined to comment on the cases. Number 6. Tiffany Camp. In a sickening act of alleged cruelty that happened in early 2022, a 33-year-old woman from Dinwiddie County, Virginia, named Tiffany Camp was accused of burying a dog alive. The allegations came to light when someone at the trailer park where Camp lived claimed to witness the act firsthand. Police reported to the property, where they found the pit bull mix, Liry, buried in a garbage bag. She was clinging to life and was expected to survive, but she faced a long road to recovery. According to an update from about a month after her rescue, Liry had made considerable progress. She was putting on weight and had undergone surgery to repair some internal damage, but she was still under close medical care due to ongoing problems with her back legs. Camp was charged with felony animal cruelty and was held without bond while she awaited her next court date. The outcome of the case is unclear, but Virginia prison records show that nobody by Camp's name is currently incarcerated in the state. Number 5. Sha Spink. When Sarah Pitcher realized that her toxic marriage to Sha Spink wasn't going to work out, she divorced him and moved from Indiana to Phoenix for a fresh start. She thought the worst was over, but she was unaware of just how unwilling Sha was to let go of their relationship. Unbeknownst to Sarah, her ex had followed her to Phoenix and made a habit of stalking her outside her house with binoculars. And when neighbors noticed Sha had expressed their concerns to Sarah, she merely assumed he was an innocent stranger bird-watching in the neighborhood. But she learned the harsh truth one day in September 2018, when Sha viciously attacked her as she stepped outside with her dog. He sprayed Sarah in the face with Raid, forced her back into the house, zip-tied her wrists, and brutally assaulted her. And in what would later turn out to be a bizarre murder plot, Sha tried to suffocate his ex-wife to death with a garbage bag. Then he stabbed her in the face with a knife while telling her that he was going to kill her and then drive off a cliff. Sarah later told local station KPNX that she still remembered the crunching sound of the blade puncturing her skull. She spent 3.5 hours fighting for her life, at times fearing that she was going to run out of strength. Then, when trying to physically fight off her ex didn't work, she attempted to convince Sha that they should go for ice cream one last time, like they used to do as a couple. And it worked. When Sarah saw people in the parking lot outside the restaurant, she fled from the vehicle and ran toward them, screaming for help. She was left blinded in one eye by the attack. Sean sped away, but it was only a matter of time before he would face justice. He's currently serving a sentence of 25 years to life for attempted murder, aggravated assault, kidnapping, and other charges. Sarah can rest easy for now, but Sean has allegedly continued to threaten her from behind bars. She plans to fight to keep him in prison when he becomes eligible for parole in 2047. Number 4. Russell Tillis. A Florida woman named Terry Patzer thought she'd found the man of her dreams when she met Russell Tillis in the late 1980s. At first she was thrilled by how attractive and noticed Tillis made her feel, but it wasn't long before his flattering gestures gave way to controlling and abusive behavior. Terry nevertheless gave Tillis the benefit of the doubt and pursued a future with him, hoping that he'd eventually go back to being her knight in shining armor. She later told the ID channel series Evil Lives Here that the relationship only worsened as Tillis became increasingly possessive and cut her off from her family and friends. Terry tried unsuccessfully to leave Tillis at least once, but by then she'd started a family with him, which understandably made it difficult to get away. At times she felt more like her husband's hostage than an actual wife, and at one point Tillis threatened to hunt Terry down if she ever left him. During those hellish years, Tillis repeatedly got arrested for attacking, abducting, and doing horrific things to other women. He often claimed that he was being falsely accused, and the consequences weren't overly harsh, even though he was in and out of prison, so Terry found reasons to believe him. But she eventually became suspicious that Tillis was actually doing the things he was constantly being accused of. After 9 years of marriage, Terry finally made a clean break. She moved into her own place, divorced Tillis, and did her best to keep herself and her children safe. And while she knew what an awful person her ex-husband was, she was nevertheless shocked when Tillis was charged with murder in 2016. He was accused of kidnapping 30-year-old Joni Lynn Gunter, killing her and dismembering her body, and Tillis was charged with the crime after her remains were found in his backyard. Terry was lucky she escaped Tillis, whose mobile home was likened to a torture chamber. Had she not left when she did, the marriage may have ended in her death. And while the true extent of Tillis's crimes may never be known, Gunter's murder put an end to his campaign of terror against innocent women. In the end, he was found guilty on all charges and was sentenced to 2 life terms. Number 3. Mark O'Leary. When a woman in Linwood, Washington accused Mark O'Leary of attacking her in 2008, law enforcement allegedly pressured her to recant her statement, and they even charged her with false reporting. But the attack really happened, and at least one other woman had come forward with similar allegations against O'Leary. Maybe O'Leary would have been stopped if his previous victims' accusations had been taken seriously, but he remained free, and in 2009 he moved to Colorado, where he stalked and attacked at least 4 more women over the next 2 years. His MO involved entering victims' homes, wearing a mask, binding them, and mercilessly assaulting them. A pair of determined female detectives from 2 different police agencies worked together after noticing similar crimes happening in their respective jurisdictions. A specialized task force finally caught O'Leary in early 2011, thanks to the building evidence, including a woman who remembered a distinctive tattoo on the attacker's leg. There was also surveillance footage of his truck at one of the crime scenes, and a memory card containing over 100 photos that O'Leary took during one of his assaults. The chronic attacker was hit with 39 criminal charges, such as stalking, kidnapping, and assault. He initially denied his guilt, but eventually admitted in court, in his own words, "I am a violent predator and I am out of control." O'Leary pleaded guilty to 28 counts and was sentenced to 327.5 years in prison. He agreed that he deserves to spend the rest of his life behind bars, and that's exactly what he's doing. The Netflix miniseries Unbelievable was based on O'Leary's case and, more specifically, on the systemic failures that led to a lack of justice for his first victim, which enabled him to continue committing horrific crimes against multiple other women. Number 2. John Long and Jessica Offenberger. In a disturbing case of incest that began in November 2019, a 51-year-old Greenbrier County, West Virginia man named John Long and his adult daughter, 29-year-old Jessica Offenberger, had a steamy affair that breached moral boundaries that most people would never even consider crossing. Someone tipped the police off to the illicit relationship in 2022, and Offenberger allegedly admitted to having nearly 90 intimate encounters with Long. According to law enforcement, the young woman claimed that she indulged in the relationship in exchange for drug money. She also reportedly said that most of the meetings happened in a camper on Long's property and along back roads. Offenberger acknowledged an awareness that Long was her biological father and said that the intimacy was consensual. During questioning, Long gave the same version of events and admitted that he knew he was being intimate with his biological daughter. Both parties were each charged with 68 counts of incest. And according to an update from August 2023, Long was sentenced to 10 to 30 years in prison. Then, after his release, he'll serve 5 to 15 years of house arrest. He'll also be on probation for 25 years. Unfortunately, though, the status of Offenberger's case is unclear. Number 1. Charlie Smith. Over a 5-month period in 2012, a former mechanic from Accomack County, Virginia, named Charles R. Smith III, committed dozens of arsons because of an intimacy problem with his girlfriend, Tonya Bundick. According to a videotaped confession, Smith and Bundick experienced problems in their relationship because of Smith's inability to perform in the bedroom. Or in other words, Smith allegedly committed the crimes out of his intimacy-related frustrations, which only added to the other problems the couple were experiencing at the time, including poverty and addiction. At their worst point, the pair were eating out of dumpsters. Smith initially refused to implicate Bundick as an accomplice to his crimes, but he'd later claim that it all started when Bundick told him to burn a building down. And so began a pattern of ending the night with some matches and old rags. It wasn't long after that before Smith became convinced that he had to continue committing arsons in order to keep her happy and to make up for his intimacy issues. The fires perplexed investigators, who spent countless hours trying to find evidence or some sort of pattern that would lead them to the culprits. They even staked themselves out near abandoned buildings, hoping to catch the perpetrators in the act. But the fires continued as the suspects somehow went unnoticed. At the height of Smith's crime spree, an arson was happening almost every night, and firefighters were sleeping in the station because they were so busy. Despite Smith's eventual decision to point the finger at Bundick as the inspiration for the fires, she was only ever connected to one arson. Smith refused to testify against his girlfriend until he found out that she was seeing another man, at which point he apparently became more willing to incriminate Bundick. Tonya Bundick took an Alford plea, which meant that she maintained her innocence but admitted that prosecutors had a strong enough argument and ample evidence to secure a conviction against her, and as a result she was sentenced to 17 years in prison and is due to be released in September 2025. Smith, on the other hand, pleaded guilty to 67 counts of arson and only received a 15-year prison sentence. He will be released on the day before Halloween in 2023. According to author Monica Hess, who wrote a book about the bizarre crime spree, Smith is finally no longer in love with Bundick after waiting years for her to return to him.
10. David Adam Pate. In 2015, David Adam Pate, a 25-year-old white supremacist from Lancaster, North Carolina, was sent away to life in prison for the gruesome stabbing and murder of Ricky James, a 33-year-old black man. The crime happened in November 2013 when Pate lured James into the woods with promises of wine before stabbing him a total of 39 times. During his arrest and lengthy police interviews, Pate showed no remorse for his actions. He claimed that he wanted to decapitate James and seemed proud that he used a butcher's knife, similar to the one shown in the movie Halloween. But shockingly, Pate actually blamed the victim for his own death, saying it was James's fault for deciding to go into the woods with someone who looked nothing like him. After investigating Pate's home, police officers found a concerning collection of at least 20 knives, some of which were homemade, and over 20 different masks. The victim's decomposing body was stumbled upon by children playing in the wooded area, while Pate was already in jail for a disorderly conduct charge, having been arrested 2 weeks earlier. During his arrest, Pate's mugshot revealed his split tongue, and a 974 tattoo on the side of his neck, associated with the white power gang known as the Gangster Disciples. He has also since expressed his intention to kill someone else in the same spot where James was murdered. At his sentencing hearing, the victim's brothers described the killer as the devil and expressed their desire for Pate to waste away in prison. Additionally, the prosecutors strongly advocated for a life sentence. Considering Pate's clear lack of remorse, Judge Dan Hall delivered the sentence, condemning Pate's actions as senseless and remorseless, and gave him life in prison with no possibility of parole. Throughout the legal proceedings, Pate refused to talk to the victim's family and never offered them a single form of an apology, illustrating the depth of his deep-rooted hatred. 9. Tamel Esco. In March 2022, a hate crime consisting of attempted murder shocked the city of Yonkers, New York, when a 42-year-old black man, Tamel Esco, brutally attacked a 67-year-old Asian woman who lived in the same building as him. The horrifying crime was caught on video, showing Esco repeatedly punching the poor victim over 125 times, accompanied by one racial slur after another. Esco's extensive criminal record included 14 previous arrests, 7 of which were felonies, and he was also taken into custody 3 separate times for violent crimes. The victim experienced severe injuries, including cuts to her head and face, facial bone fractures, and brain bleeding. But she was reported to be in stable condition at a local hospital not long after the attack. Neighbors described her as a kind and decent person. The building's tenant association expressed concerns about the safety of the residents after the incident. They cited the growing presence of individuals with violent criminal backgrounds or mental health issues living inside the complex as the root cause of the problem. The attack, which mirrored a similar one that happened in Chinatown, highlights the surge in hate crimes against Asian Americans across the country. New York City has witnessed a 96% increase in hate crimes overall, with Asian hate crimes skyrocketing 343% in 2021. The Yonkers mayor and New York Governor Kathy Hochul publicly condemned the attack, emphasizing the need to punish the offender to the fullest extent of the law. But the incident has also raised questions about the safety of vulnerable populations, particularly the homeless, who've recently become targets of a suspected serial killer in New York and Washington, D.C. City officials have advised homeless individuals to seek shelter and to collaborate with law enforcement to apprehend the suspect. But sadly, the plight of the homeless and the challenges they face in finding shelter is still a pressing concern with no end in sight. 8. Anna Montgomery. In 2020, authorities in Belfast, Ireland investigated an alleged hate crime that happened in the city center. It involved an assault on a transgender woman named Anna Montgomery. Anna, who was just 20 years old at the time of the attack, was out minding her own business and enjoying a meal with her boyfriend, Jamie Gervin, when the incident took place. She said that she was suddenly hit in the face while having drinks, resulting in injuries like bruising and a deep sense of public humiliation. After attending Bangor Academy and transitioning to female at 16, Anna had strong support from her family, friends, and community. She'd been actively open about her personal journey, seeking to educate others about gender reassignment surgery and the transgender community as a whole. According to Belfast Live, after the attack, Anna thanked her friends as well as the restaurant staff for their unending support during the challenging time. The Police Service of Northern Ireland, PSNI, confirmed their ongoing investigation into the matter, treating it as a serious hate crime. And Anna said that even in 2020, in today's society, she faced violence for just being her true self. She says that she hopes for greater understanding and acceptance in the world moving forward. Unfortunately, though, it's now 2023, and there's been no updates on the case, meaning the person responsible for the crime has likely gotten away. 7. Patrick Crusius. At the beginning of July 2023, Patrick Crusius, the suspect of a racist mass shooting carried out at a Walmart in El Paso, Texas back in 2019, was handed a sentence of 90 consecutive life terms in prison. The attack targeted mainly Hispanic shoppers and tragically caused the deaths of 23 people. The sentencing hearing was presided over by U.S. District Judge David Guadarrama. Crusius pleaded guilty in February and agreed to a plea deal in order to avoid a death sentence. But he still faces Texas state charges that could potentially lead him to getting a lethal injection. During the emotional impact statements delivered by several victims in court, the devastating consequences of Crusius's actions were clear as day. Families who lost loved ones expressed their grief and the lasting effects the attacks has continued to have on their lives. Prosecutors also revealed that Crusius drove over 700 miles, 1,126.5 kilometers, from suburban Dallas to El Paso, armed with a Romanian derivative of the infamous AK-47 and hollow point ammunition. He did this to conduct the attack on August 3, 2019. The motivation behind the crime was linked to Crusius's belief in a conspiracy theory he called ethnic replacement. He truly believed that immigrants from Mexico and Latin America were carrying out a Hispanic invasion of Texas. Similar ideas are common among white supremacists and have been associated with many other mass shootings. It's concerning that some see immigrants as invaders. This idea has also gained traction among some Republican lawmakers, with criticism that rhetoric like this perpetuates racist ideals. The sentencing hearing saw victims confronting Crusius directly with all of their pain and anger, with most expressing their sincere desire for justice. While Crusius's plea deal took a federal death penalty off the table, he may still face lethal injection in a Texas state court. His defense lawyer argued that he suffers from delusional thinking and a broken brain, but a trial date for the Texas state charges have yet to be set. 6. Chen Ziqi. In September 2022, Chen Ziqi was given a 24-year prison sentence for leading a vicious attack against 4 women at a restaurant in Tangshan, China. The assault took place in June of that year and was triggered when one of the women rejected Chen's romantic advances. Afterward, disturbing surveillance camera footage of the attack went viral, sparking widespread debates over gender violence in the country. During the fight, Chen and a group of 27 other men used bottles, chairs, and fists to brutally beat up the women that they chose as their victims. The victims suffered severe injuries, with 2 of them needing intensive care to recover. And although the police initially classified the extent of their wounds simply as minor, disturbing photos revealed the women were covered in blood after leaving the scene. In addition to the lengthy prison sentence, Chen was fined 320,000 yuan, 40,000 pounds, or $45,000 for what happened. The other defendants involved in the crime also received sentences ranging from a measly 6 months to 11 years behind bars. Additionally, the court ordered Chen and 5 more men to compensate the victims for medical expenses and other losses they faced. The incident shed a bit of light on the growing issue of domestic abuse in China. And in the wake of the attack, women's rights activists emphasized the need for better reporting and handling of similar cases. The brutal assault sparked outrage and intense debates on social media platforms, with discussions about gender-focused violence taking center stage on a popular platform known as Weibo. 5. Bruce McArthur. In 2019, a Canadian serial killer that was known for targeting gay men was sentenced to life in prison. The 67-year-old was given 8 concurrent life sentences, 1 for each victim, and won't be eligible for parole until he serves at least 25 years. Bruce McArthur pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder, ultimately admitting to the brutal slayings of the victims, some of whom were close personal friends of his. According to experts, Bruce McArthur's crimes and his patterns of behavior heavily align with those of certain classes of serial killers. Crown prosecutor Michael Cantlin even presented a 36-page statement in court, detailing McArthur's gruesome crimes and the graphic details surrounding the deaths. The killer has since pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder, and his victims have been publicly identified as Andrew Kinsman, Salim Eason, Skandaraj Navaratnam, Abdul Basir Faizi, Kirushna Kumar Kanagaratnam, Dean Liswick, Sarush Mahmoodi, and Majid Kayan. Ju-Young Lee, a University of Toronto associate professor of sociology who specializes in serial killers, compared MacArthur's murders to those committed by Dennis Rader, or the BTK killer, who took 10 people's lives in Wichita, Kansas. Both killers strangled their victims to death before posing their bodies in grotesque positions and taking photographs as mementos to relive the crimes over and over again. MacArthur's actions involved meticulous planning and deliberate execution, leading experts to label them as organized killings. Unlike disorganized killers, MacArthur carefully thought out each and every aspect of his murders, disposing of bodies and concealing evidence. His files on his targets were also similar to Rader's, indicating a project-like approach to the senseless crimes. The posing of victims, a behavior seen in MacArthur's case, is rare and associated with killers who derive pleasure from taking lives. The poses reflect the killer's deep-rooted desires to dominate and control people, even in death. MacArthur's photos captured victims in multiple situations, including physical assault, showcasing his desire for power over them. Serial killers typically take mementos from their victims of crime scenes as symbols of the excitement and gratification they felt during the act. These objects can evoke memories, providing satisfaction until their next urge to kill comes. MacArthur held on to his victims' bracelets and personal journals to remember just how powerful he must have been in those moments to have taken people's lives. Justice John McMahon described the murders as pure evil in court, specifically condemning MacArthur's exploitation of his target's vulnerabilities. Some of the men were homeless and struggled with addiction, while others were facing deportation or hadn't shared their real sexuality to their families. Despite MacArthur's belief that his victims would go largely unnoticed, their absence was felt deeply by their loved ones. Family members expressed their grief and anger in front of the jury, highlighting the devastating impact of the crimes. Justice McMahon commended both the prosecution and defense for the roles they played in the trial, acknowledging the challenging task of defending a clear-cut serial killer. He also praised the police investigation that ultimately brought MacArthur to justice. It's believed that MacArthur's personal battle with homosexuality haunted him, and that he likely suffered from some type of trauma as a young child. But this is just one of the reasons that have been suggested as a possible motive for his senseless murders. It's not clear why he committed such evil acts on innocent people. We'll probably never fully understand what goes on inside the head of a serial killer. 4. Brendan Doolin. Brendan Doolin, a 41-year-old man from Crumlin, Dublin, who was previously sentenced to 3 years in prison for harassing 6 journalists, made an appearance before the Dublin Circuit Criminal Court in May 2023 for charges of breaching his bail conditions. In 2019, Doolin was sentenced to 5 years in prison. The final 2 years were suspended after he admitted to harassing 6 women by sending them hundreds of abusive messages between May 2012 and February 2018. After being released from custody in December 2021, Doolin allegedly breached his bail by making contact with his victims, despite the law forbidding him. In April and May 2019, 2 of his victims, Kate McEvoy and Sarah Griffin, reported posts made online that resembled Doolin's past abusive language. The State Police Force of the Irish Republic, or the Gardaí, got a warrant to search Doolin's house, where they took his laptop. The device held photos of Kate McEvoy and Roe McDermott that were taken in the Dublin Circuit Criminal Court atrium and were linked to a specific smartphone. Further investigation led to the discovery of the hidden phone under Doolin's floorboards, and he eventually admitted that he owned it. Additionally, Doolin made multiple email addresses resembling the names of some affected parties and used them to post obnoxious messages online. The victims reported getting contacted by others asking about these messages, causing distress and fear among the targets. Doolin also responded to tweets from the victims using abusive language. But surprisingly, according to the victim impact statements presented in court as evidence, the affected parties expressed their wish for Doolin to get the necessary help to address his issues. Doolin's defense attorney, Keith Spencer BL, argued that his client's bail breaches were of a lesser magnitude than his original offenses. Spencer said that Doolin has since refrained from using computers completely and is cooperating with the probation service. He's even allegedly showed remorse for his actions. Judge Martin Nolan, who previously sentenced Doolin, described his harassment as the dark side of the internet, causing trauma to the targeted women. He emphasized the persistence of Doolin's harassment, despite the victims begging him to stop, and characterized his behavior as very vindictive. Although Doolin's psychiatric report didn't dispute his awareness of right and wrong, the judge found his offenses serious and intimidating. The decision on Doolin's case was adjourned until the following day to allow further deliberation. But unfortunately, no updates have been posted on the case, so it's unclear what punishment Doolin was handed for breaching his bail. 3. Kelly Fulse. In 2017, Dr. Kelly Fulse, a 35-year-old Louisiana veterinarian, faced charges after allegedly shooting and killing her neighbor's dog, Bruiser, because of incessant barking. The incident resulted in aggravated animal cruelty charges, illegal discharge of a firearm, and 2 counts of drug possession against Fulse. Bruiser was a 15-month-old American bulldog, basically a puppy, and his owner, Stacy Fitzner, found the lifeless body of her beloved pet in the backyard after leaving him while she went to work. After inspection, they found a gunshot wound to the back of the dog's head, indicating that someone had shot him. Sadly, despite efforts to save Bruiser, he succumbed to his injuries, leaving the family devastated. Fitzner condemned the act, asserting that the person responsible for the crime must be deeply disturbed to commit such cruelty. She expressed disbelief at the accusation that Bruiser could have pushed open the gates himself, pointing out that someone purposely opened them. The incident happened after Fitzner and Fulse exchanged texts about the dog's barking in the weeks leading up to the tragedy. Fitzner reportedly received hostile messages and videos from her neighbor, which escalated tensions between the two of them. Sheriff Joseph Lapinto expressed utter shock over the situation, since it involved a veterinarian shooting a neighbor's dog. Fulse was taken into custody, and it was later revealed that she used narcotics, including diazepam and Adderall. But authorities never recovered the weapon that was used in the shooting. After the crime, Dr. Fulse was fired from the veterinary hospital where she worked for over 2 decades, starting at the age of 15. The hospital owner expressed shock and disgust over the actions of someone with no prior history of complaints, who's considered well-liked by clients. The incident left Fitzner feeling unsafe in her own house. And the tragedy of losing Bruiser, who was a loving and friendly member of their family, continues to affect them deeply to this day. Dr. Fulse remained in custody on bond, and she faced multiple charges related to the shooting and drug possession. But in the end, the judge deferred imposing a harsh sentence and instead ordered Fulse to serve 3 years probation. This decision didn't sit right with Fitzner and other animal lovers who view dogs as members of their family. But there just wasn't enough evidence to prove Fulse was responsible for the crime. 2. Daniel Perry. In May 2023, a United States Army sergeant named Daniel Perry received 25 years in prison from a Texas State District Court for the murder of Garrett Foster, an active Black Lives Matter protester. The sentence was handed down by Judge Cliff Brown of the 147th Criminal District Court. Perry's legal team announced their intention to appeal the sentence in the future, and that set the stage for Republican Governor Greg Abbott to potentially pardon the Army sergeant, who claims that he acted out of self-defense. Perry was ultimately convicted of murder for the shooting of Garrett Foster, a 28-year-old U.S. Air Force veteran who participated in a Black Lives Matter rally in Austin years ago on July 25, 2020. For better context, both Perry and Foster are white. The protest happened in the aftermath of several high-profile incidents of police violence against Black Americans, including the deaths of both Breonna Taylor and George Floyd. After Perry's sentencing, Sheila Foster, the mother of the victim, expressed strong relief, saying that they were finally going to get justice for Garrett. Addressing Perry directly, she expressed hope that he'd rid himself of the hatred in his heart. Before the sentencing hearing, prosecutors introduced evidence showing that Perry had made and shared racist statements online and through text messages in the past, including a message about potentially shooting looters during the protests. Prosecutor Guillermo Gonzalez argued for a minimum sentence of 25 years for the murder. characterizing Perry as a loaded gun, ready to react violently to perceived threats at any time. But Perry's defense said that the messages, although distasteful, were protected speech taken out of context. They argued that Perry was afraid for his life, since Garrett allegedly pointed an AK-47 at him during the rally. In a statement made before the sentencing, Judge Brown assured the public that Perry was given a fair and impartial trial, addressing concerns of political bias in the case. But the situation has since drawn national attention, especially among conservatives, with Governor Abbott expressing his intention to pursue a pardon for Perry. So now, only time will tell what will become of Perry's fate. 1. Janiyah Williams. As of August 2022, a Queens District Attorney named Melinda Katz has reported the arrest and charging of a third black woman in connection to a hate crime assault on a white woman in New York. 19-year-old Janiyah Williams is currently facing charges of assault as a hate crime and other offenses. And if convicted, she could face anywhere from 3.5 to 15 years in prison. The incident happened on July 9, 2022, on a southbound MTA bus in Queens. Williams and 2 other black teenage girls allegedly approached the victim, with Williams making anti-white statements, expressing hatred towards white people as a whole. She's accused of threatening to kill the victim and repeatedly hitting her with a shopping bag holding a glass jar. And according to witness accounts, the trio also spat on the victim before leaving the bus. The unnamed victim received multiple injuries and was taken to the hospital for treatment. Once she arrived, she was given 3 staples on the right side of her head for a deep laceration. According to data from the NYPD's Hate Crimes Task Force, this incident is part of a growing trend, as hate crimes in New York have shown a 76% increase since April 2022, compared to the previous year. The data reveals that as of June 28, 2022, there have been 35 hate crimes against black people, 51 against Asians, 149 against Jewish people, and only 1 against a white person. But nonetheless, authorities are committed to holding those responsible for bias-motivated attacks accountable, as they should. Have you ever had to deal with a hater? Let us know in the comments below. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.